Following a consultation by the Department for Transport, the UK is considering a change to its drone regulation. There is a draft private members' bill on this subject before Parliament, which is expected to have a second reading in February 2019.
Although we have yet to see a draft bill, among the suggestions from the DFT are compulsory registration for drones over a certain weight, tests for pilots, and wider police powers to enforce the new rules. Post, in association with Kennedy's, questions insurers, brokers and MGAs about the importance of regulatory standards being introduced. Research has found that over half consider this as a top priority for drones in the EU. But only 1 in 10 had detailed knowledge of the European Aviation Safety Agency's existing consultation. So is the insurance industry doing enough to shape this legislation, and what are the barriers to its implementation?
I think insurers will be encouraged that there is now draft legislation in front of Parliament and that questions like compulsory registration are on the agenda. Probably it's right to say that historically it's mainly been aviation insurers who are better familiar with drones as an aviation risk and who felt most comfortable with the existing regulation. In future, as the use of drones at the smaller scale for both domestic and commercial purposes increases, we would expect to see more opportunities for casualty, property and domestic line insurers who have historically avoided aviation risk. And as that increases, so their interest in regulation will also increase. I think we're some way off a situation where drone use for all categories is subject to compulsory insurance, but when we get there, one would expect the industry as a whole to take a very proactive attitude towards regulation. The first main barrier to implementation of new rules is likely to be actually seeing legislation passed in the first place. For the next couple of years, Brexit is going to dominate parliamentary time, and there may simply not be sufficient time to allocate to legislation like this. Going beyond that, whilst we remain subject to European regulations for a transition period, we'll need to be careful not to introduce rules that may be incompatible with the European regulatory framework. Going beyond that and looking at the details of particular new changes, there will be a difficult balance between making sure that new rules are proportionate and also allocating sufficient resource to the state to actually enforce those.
The post-Kennedy's research found that lack of drone registration was considered the largest obstacle to the implementation and enforcement of a drone regime. So what can we expect from the draft bill?
I think in terms of the new regulations, we will expect to see, first and foremost, mandatory registration of all drones over 250 grams. Alongside that, the government is also likely to implement some form of requirements for demonstration of pilot competency. So taking the form of online education and testing, and that will be linked to the registration process. The government has been very clear that it wants to promote the UK as a centre of excellence for the drone industry. So I think we'll expect to see rules that encourage the industry to grow and develop in ways that perhaps it wouldn't in other jurisdictions because the rules are perhaps more relaxed in some respects. That said, there will be some additional restrictions relating, for example, to the use of airspace around other aircraft. So I think we'll probably see restrictions in airspace around airports, no-fly zones around airports and other key infrastructure, and restrictions in flying above 400 foot for all drones, regardless of weight. Enforcement has been a hot topic in all of the consultations, not just in the UK, but other jurisdictions as well. In the UK, the government is looking at increasing the range of penalties for breaches of the regulations, whatever form they may take, and also providing the police with greater powers of enforcement. So the police will have powers in addition to the Civil Aviation Authority, who currently enforce the rules in the UK. That might take the form of for example, seizing equipment if the police believe that a drone has been used illegally. I think generally the drone industry as a whole wants to see the new rules improve clarity and continue to promote safety as they do now. The new rules also need to be flexible enough and forward-thinking enough to allow for the development of technology and the growth of the industry in general. That hopefully would mean use of beyond visual line of sight provisions for BV loss operations and operations in congested airspace. More specifically, the insurance industry has said that it wants to see registration and highlighted that as a top priority, seeing the ability to be able to track equipment back to an operator as key to promoting safety. More generally, I think insurers just want to see the rules avoid any ambiguity, any grey areas, so that when they say to an insurer, we want you to comply with the regulations, and that's a condition of the policy, both the insurer and the operator of the drone knows exactly what that means. So removing any grey areas benefits the insured and the insurers.
North America was considered to be leading the way in terms of the removal of regulatory barriers when it came to the wider adoption and acceptance of drone technology. What are other territories seeing in terms of the evolution of drone regulation?
During the years 2015 to 2017, most of the European countries have implemented regulations for the use of drones, each with its differences and restrictions, some of them more flexible than others. The EU has set up an ambitious project called U-Space to create one single airspace aimed to enable complex drone operations in different kinds of environments, including urban areas. U-Space should be flexible enough to encourage innovation and business development while at the same time addressing issues such as safety, security, privacy and environmental impact. Regarding the barriers to the regulation on drones, while in some countries such as Italy, Spain or Denmark they establish compulsory insurance for the commercial use of drones, our general feeling is that the more restrictive the regulation is, the less drones will be used and the less insurance will be needed. In Spain, for example, the regulation was changed in December 2017, making it more flexible to encourage business development. In conclusion, it is all about finding the balance between safety and security versus business opportunities.
As most of you are aware, U.S. aviation is regulated by the Federal Aviation Administration, more commonly known as the FAA. The FAA traditionally is a highly regulatory and, for obvious reasons, very rigid facility. That having been said, the FAA has recognized the explosive growth in drone usage and operation, with over 1 million new registrations having come into place in the past 1 year. For that reason, the FAA has adopted a two-pronged approach to drone usage. I would define it as registration and education. On the registration side, the FAA has made drone operation mandatory. What that requires you to do is to get onto the FAA website. You pay a $5 annual registration fee. You are assigned a specific number which must be recorded or coded onto your drone. It is applicable to all Part 107 operators for drones that are under 55 pounds. Once you have registered, which you just renew on an annual basis, you are given a paper card and also an electronic copy of your registration so that you can have that available at all times. Progressing on to the education side, the FAA recognizes with the number of drones that will be in the air that it is critical that operators know what the parameters of safe operation are. For that reason, the FAA website, and if you go to the FAA website, and I would encourage everybody to take a look at it, it's extremely user-friendly. Right on the home page, there is an icon that has a drone. You just click it, and it will take you through everything you need to know. But with respect to the education component, probably the most important and exciting aspect of it is there is an app that was developed by the FAA called Before You Fly. It's the letter B, the number 4, the letter U, FLY. It's on Android and on iOS. And what you do is you download it. It will lock into your GPS coordinates. And so if you go out to a park or wherever it is that you want to fly your drone, you just click on the app. It will tell you exactly whether you're in any type of restricted airspace, what your maximum height is for flying, and what the parameters of your safe operation are. The FAA believes that by educating the flying public, that drone safety can be managed.
The Middle East, just like other parts of the world, has been playing regulatory catch-up with this new emerging technology. In 2015, the United Arab Emirates issued its first of 5 regulations on drones. This was followed by Bahrain and Saudi Arabia in 2016 and Qatar in 2017. But it's the UAE that has been at the forefront of how it's going to integrate this new technology into everyday life. Last year, the Dubai government announced that it was investigating the use of drones for autonomous passenger transportation. But what does this all mean for commercial operators, and what are the insurance requirements? Well, up until March this year, commercial operators were required to maintain 2 million dirhams for third-party liability risks. That's the equivalent of about $550,000 US. But based on complaints by these operators to the regulator on the levels of premiums that they were required to pay, the regulator repealed those provisions, and as of March this year, any insurance that's to be held by a commercial operator is a matter of the discretion of the regulator. What does this mean in going forward? Well, in the UAE, you've got an aviation safety regulator which is very conscious of the commercial concerns of those operating in this environment. As the drone industry takes off across the UAE, both insurers and operators alike will have to keep their eyes on the regulations as they seem to change on a day-to-day basis.
We are obviously at an interesting crossroads with regards what the private members bill outline, the UK's position regards the rest of Europe post-Brexit, and what lessons can be learned from further afield. All of which will ultimately dictate insurers' appetite to both underwrite drone risks and also use drones more in their day-to-day business.